Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show, sponsored by Pocket. Welcome to, I guess, Wildcard Wednesday, for lack of a better way to describe it, or Wake Up Early Wednesday, or Way Too Early Wednesday, or Why Are We Doing This So Early Wednesday? Right? I haven't decided the name for Wednesday yet, so right now it will be Wildcard Wednesday. And also, you know, this day is meant to kind of at least cater to people who might not get a chance to come in to tune into this during different time slots. But I did want to kind of also, because it's Wildcard Wednesday, allow you guys to maybe vote or decide on what we talk about today. Witchy Wednesday, Wicked Wednesday. So first of all, I want you to know that, like, when it comes to, you know, marketing, the power of storytelling is such a big deal. I spent yesterday on the AVAX talk. Did you guys get to attend? Yeah, good for Andre. He's up. He's grinding. Hell yeah. Yeah. If you guys did or if you didn't, it was like a smaller group. Like the amount of people that tuned into AVAX talk was smaller. I think Lonzo, one of the hosts, wasn't even in attendance, but we got like a much higher rate of conversion than we normally do. I don't know if you guys have noticed all the new people in the Discord server, but I think that they are. I think by even talking about like awareness and how to raise it, I think that the message that we had in AVAX talk just resonated more. So there was larger audiences, I think, last week, but I think this week converted a lot more. Yesterday was the last time that we have that we sponsored it. We might sponsor it again, but I think that might be more like October. I might still keep going on Tuesdays. Does that make sense? Like, I might just show up on Tuesdays, continue to do it, but it might not be sponsored per se. And I have to find out to anybody who I owe that contest money to. I'm gonna figure that out as well. But today we can in fact focus on two things. And first of all, I want to talk about just the reception that people have, and just how I want you guys to understand how tiny pieces of information can affect your whole perception of things. And first of all, I want you guys to understand something, that all of the best people in finance they have something called equanimity. And they're also known as being stoic or resilient. And the fact of the matter is, there is always something going to be happening in a market that might not be lined up with your strategy, like your ideal goal, but it doesn't serve your bag to effectively outsource the blame about why this is happening. What the best traders and investors do is they always take every new pivot and they position themselves to take advantage of that change. So I want you guys to know something. We've been announcing that we're going to be tapering emissions for a while now, right? We've been not a while, maybe a week or two. Does that make sense? We've been announcing this. We even did it because I think when I launched Genesis V2, I said I'd be tapering them. Does that make sense? I said, hey, we're going to start it off with a 4.6, and we're going to see where we can go from here. Naturally, my plan for August involved a different marketing strategy than I ended up adopting, but it's fine. And upon hearing the news that we're tapering emissions, whether or not they understood what our strategy was, some people viewed the pessimism of either side. Does that make sense? Like in the inflationary scenario, right? Where inflation is greater than deflation. I'm going to erase this here, but if you guys don't know the word equanimity, this is going to be the thing that you kind of embody with yourself. It's going to be the biggest difference maker in your position. So with inflation being larger than deflation, or really just expansion more than your quantity goes up and your price ends up going down. Does that make sense? If your deflation is higher than your inflation, your quantity is going down while your price is going up. Generally speaking, Does that make sense? Like generally? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Now the fact of the matter is, when you see farm APR, this is being calculated quantity times price as a percentage. Does that make sense? So some people, when they've learned that we're going to be making deflation higher than inflation, they are bullish. Does that make sense? They're like, okay, I am now going to figure out how to acquire the most that I can when the chart effectively hits its bottom. Does that make sense? Like effectively when they see the numbers that deflation is higher than inflation, this is the time to get in position, and all the tokens they've acquired thus far, they will effectively keep acquiring them. Does that make sense? When we relaunched Genesis V2, like the extra emissions were kind of the award for the apology of screwing up Genesis V1. Some people believe that the strategy to make deflation higher than inflation is punishing the Genesis participants. Did you guys know that? That this is a punishment. First of all, I want you to understand a reduction in reward is not a punishment. If you're getting compensated for something that we felt bad about and we stop compensating you guys, this is also not a punishment. Does that make sense? Do you guys hear the signal? Are you guys tuned in? This is not a punishment, okay? But if you're going to react pessimistically about everything you see, you're probably not going to make it. I'm just going to be honest. Like there isn't anything I can do for you. There isn't anything you can do for you. Because you're going to end up reacting the wrong way and making the wrong choice. So when we turn off quantity, when we make inflation lower, does that make sense? It might look like APR is tapering. Does that make sense? It might look like APR is getting sliced by 40%. Does that make sense? We're just crushing APR. But the fact of the matter is that the tokens that you're receiving, we're trying to bring the price of them back up. Does that make sense? And if you guys understand how our APR is calculated, it's quantity times price as a percentage. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that confirmation. I do appreciate that sensory feedback. I need it too. I look forward to the chat more than the chart, but yes. Yeah, does that make sense? So literally, like, even though APR might look like it's getting flattened, what do we risk here? Like I saw in chat, somebody was having some sort of technical issue with being like staked in the farms and can't figure out how to unstake. This is the only person we've had with this problem, and you know they they accused us as opposed to like on their side. Like we have literally like devs crawling this chat all the time, just listening to people's complaints. And it's still unclear what that person is doing. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if anybody here has had technical issues. Yeah, Zonic, it's again, like you cannot help somebody that like already has their mind made up. And it is unfortunate, but like the fact of the matter is that this project, it needs to have that level of awareness where, you know, people come and go as they were. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not trying to, a lot of projects, they create this idea that they don't ever want anybody to leave. Does that make sense? Do you guys get what I'm saying? They're like, hey, you can't exit. Don't sell. Just keep holding. We need all of you. And I know that that's just not realistic, and that doesn't really help people's economic freedom. And that's the whole point that red candles can't kill this project, which I'm going to be able to explain and even prove shortly, because there is a number that we can get to in farm APR where you will see that the price inevitably has to climb. Does that make sense? People who were here before Genesis, they would remember that the times you would see the Pyre gas downtick was when large surges in meeting took place. Almost as if the increase in supply would end up passing information to the price chart over time that it needed to be, that it was overvalued. Does that make sense? And then it needed to swoop into a downswing. And then over days or weeks, and there's people here that can testify this, you would eventually see the price begin ticking back up until meeting was profitable again. I wonder I wonder. It's almost like deflation outpaced inflation, and then the price went into an uptick. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, it's crazy that we spent 3 months before launching Genesis just proving that this works. I know that it's not like clear to everybody. Yeah, almost, Javery, almost. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's almost like this. Anyways, I wanted you guys to understand something because I was sarcastic, Pega, because sometimes, like, sarcasm is a defense mechanism, by the way. It's not really paragonal leadership or whatever, but sometimes all I can do is being sarcastic. Yeah. Sometimes all I can do is be sarcastic because I don't know. It worries me that decentralized finance has so many people that are in it, and they this is not easy finance. Like not meme coins not easy. Like Bitcoin is not easy. Marmosets is. You know, and marmoset is a word that I use to kind of like dismiss them, put them all in a group. Like, you know, there's no pleasing them. They're a bunch of children anyway. But today I want to really like not lean on the word marmoset because I think of it more like I want nothing more than to help this person, but it's like an animal with their head stuck in the fence. Does that make sense? Like they just refuse to believe that I'm trying to help them, so they end up strangling themselves in panic. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Have you ever seen like a deer or like a sheep or a dog with their head stuck in the fence? Have you guys ever seen this? Yeah, and again, the reason that this work is so difficult is because I have to contrast myself against hundreds of developers and project founders that in theory had no idea what they're doing. You know, I want you guys to understand something. Literally that example right there, yeah. And then literally, do they charge right back in? There's a video on the internet where they free this deer from the fence by clipping it open, and then it freaks out, and then it runs in this gigantic circle, and then it crushes itself right back into the fence, and it's stuck again. Yeah, it's crazy. It reminded me of it the other day. But I want you guys to understand something. Like, for those of you who are actually aware of how this works, and by the way, your understanding is not unique. Like, look around the general chat, look in the community on Twitter. Like, other people understand this works too. And it's not like it's not sorcery. This to me is a parlor trick. It is a card trick. But to some people, it'll always be sorcery. Does that make sense? It'll always be like, how is he going to do it? I don't know how many of you remember what the circus did in the first half of 2022. But we went into tomb forks that were literally like way below peg. Does that make sense? 0.05. Does that make sense? And we brought them back to peg. And we succeeded 8 out of 10 times. Does that make sense? And I'm saying that again and again and again. So, you know, if you ask like how many times have you seen a project come back from looking like this in DeFi? Well, when Five was kind of in charge, it happened 8 out of 10 times. Does that make sense? It happened 80% of the time. And the only two ones that I failed at were Frozen Tomb and 2Ohm. So the fact, if you understand why I ended up acquiring these projects, it's because I just realized that instead of being the backseat driver, I needed to be the front seat driver. Does that make sense? Like, I know that nobody cares about the fact that we did repegging campaigns in 2022 anymore. But like, to me, this is still an unsettled score. Does that make sense? The fact of the matter is that I needed a project that kind of had bigness to be able to really repair 2Ohm. Now, in order to do that, Pyre Phantom needed a bigness capable of being support for 2Ohm. In fact, for 2Ohm, 3Ohm, and Z-Ohm. Now, when I talk about bigness, I'm talking about like 3 parameters. I'm talking about market cap, I'm talking about total supply, and I'm talking about 24-hour volume, believe it or not. And I think that I actually measure bigness. By the way, bigness is also a Feidian fake word. I mean, I guess it's a real word too. But like, I needed this project to effectively have these numbers large enough so that when it eventually rises up to the meeting level again, that it's not capable, it's not, should I say, Metatrage will not just crush Pyre Phantom like it did during pre-Genesis. For those of you who don't know, the market cap of Pyre Phantom used to be a few $100s during pre-Genesis. Does that make sense? We were beta testing it with a market cap of like $700. Decay was there too. But now, Pyre Phantom has like an 8-figure total supply now. Does that make sense? Pyre Phantom having an 8-figure total supply might just make it big enough to provide support for 2-ohm, 3-ohm, and Z-ohm. So that when we make deflation first surpass inflation, what's that going to do to all the people who just mindlessly trend trade? Does that make sense? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, if you're a mindless trend trader and all you think about is like, oh wait, we're actually doing a repeg. Yeah. So effectively, we're going to make deflation outpace inflation, and we're just going to get a moderate uptick here and there. But effectively, if we just keep this moderate uptick, eventually people will figure out like, oh hey, they're really not going to increase inflation again. So therefore, this would be the time to fucking find more capital to buy. And therefore, that will be autocatalytic, and we will end up, what's that M word? Moving the chart? Manipulating the chart? Mooning it? Hey, maybe. But the point being is, what do people like Dex Screener and the people who watch Dex Screener love to see? They love to see stupid gains. Does that make sense? If you guys remember in the first week of Genesis, you still had this problem where these tokens could only go up like 5x or 10x to peg. Does that make sense? They can only go up like 5x or 10x, right? But like a 5x or 10x is not nearly as exciting as what? A 10x, a 20x, a 100x, a 500x. Does that make sense to you guys? So, again, I knew that something that I could time in preparation with me doing all this marketing, which Pepe, is inflate the price to the point where it begins deflating, that it begins to look like the type of stuff that degens love. So by the time Pyre Phantom touches the TWAP of 2-ohm or 3-ohm again, it looks like it's already done quite a huge gain. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to pack a whole bunch of percentage gain beneath the Metatrage line. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Because, by the way, when we hit the Metatrage line again, now there's going to be a bunch of people with large bags of Pyre Phantom that can effectively deepen liquidity at the Metatrage line. Does that make sense? I think that's what people will do, actually. In fact, I'm going to tell people to do it, because that will, in fact, be what it takes to kind of make this deflation move all 4 of the tokens and not just one of them. Does that make sense? And by the way, that 1,000% gain, that, I don't know, 5,000% gain, whatever the fuck it looks like, that will be what it takes people to think, oh wow, this project really is going places, because sometimes that's all they need to see. But the price chart is gameable. I want you guys to understand that. It's not like a mystery. In fact, if you guys got good at reading the PPESD, you would already kind of know what the price chart is going to do tomorrow. Most of the time, I would say about 90% of the time, the PPESD is going to tell you kind of what the price chart is going to do. There are disrupts and upsets. Like I think on Saturday there was a larger sell, and I think somebody is threatening to move liquidity. I don't fucking know what they're trying to do. But the point being is that as the PPESD, I know that you guys have maybe not studied it that much, but in the future, it really will be the omen. It'll be like, not the omen, but it'll be like the premonition. Like, this is the data that you kind of are going to figure out for what's happening tomorrow. Like, if you look at the PPESD today, it tells you what's going to happen tomorrow. Most of the time. There are disrupts, but like, as far as having this consistency of predictability, the PPESD, because we know that supply changes take a few epochs to kind of fully register onto price, this is why we give you 7 epochs of data. That's sort of why I chose that number. I thought it was good. I didn't want to go all the way to 9. I thought 7 was enough. Additionally, by the way, guys, we have Turkish stickers now. Can I show you guys? Here, so the Turkish stickers were cut as a square and not as a circle, but I don't give a shit. I'm just going to show them to you. Here, I'm actually pasting it upside down too, but yeah, it'll show up in Discord chat right there. Yep, so they're a square, not a circle, but those are gonna get placed like everywhere in I think 8 different cities in Turkey. And basically, that statement says the exact same thing as it is in English. There's another sticker, by the way, that we're bringing into the English game because we're gonna go with a two sticker campaign. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. 2 sticker campaign, and the other sticker is more obnoxious. I think that's getting here Friday. So on Friday, I should be able to, I guess depending what time it gets here, debut another sticker. And then of course, these stickers, the stickering campaigns are going to be in full force. And we will have pictures of stickers for the next 2 years, I think, or 3 years. But most importantly, it begins this background of, first of all, repurposing content, and secondly, appearing to be ubiquitous. Because if you have enough stickers in enough places, eventually people keep seeing these stickers and then eventually scan them. Does that make sense? Yeah, I know that might not make sense, but the reason you see these stickers at all is because they work, right? As long as they're scaled up enough. So that's what we're doing. We're gonna have stickers in multiple places in the United States. We're gonna have stickers in multiple places in Turkey, possibly in Canada. More on that later. Now, aside from what I talked about now, and by the way, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we have a Turkish Twitter account, which I will write in chat. It is called PYRESWAP TR. If you guys could give this account a follow, even if you don't speak Turkish, because it will it allows it to seed itself with some background, some early followers, which will make it look like it's not a fucking scam account. Does that make sense to you guys? Like an impersonation account? Are you guys following me? So like, even though there's nothing there yet, if you have a Twitter account and you could go follow this account, that would be useful. Additionally, there was a couple other things I wanted to talk about. Okay, so Pega was asking about cross lambda coefficient. So first of all, has anybody here ever heard the word delta when it comes to an option or a derivative in finance, or a delta hedge or a delta neutral strategy? Yes, okay. And what it appears to be might be not exactly intuitive. Okay, so I'm actually going to do a little. Okay, in mathematical finance, the Greeks are the quantities, or partial derivatives, representing the sensitivity of the price of a derivative instrument. So, yes, Philip Avax, I will do it today or tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, so effectively, there's these things that basically measure price sensitivities. And thank you so much, Philip. I appreciate that a lot. Yes, and it is literally just a shirt with a blazer. And thank you so much. Yeah, and today or tomorrow, I normally do them all either. It's actually Thursday or Friday. I normally do them, but like, yes, you can definitely see that I definitely have a strong history in in the giveaway chat. I have a strong history of actually hitting it, and yeah, don't worry, you're definitely taken care of. And the Greeks are vital tools in risk management, and what this means, yeah, I don't have 1 million. I have maybe 600,000 suits. Zonic is exaggerating. So delta is the most famous one, and it measures the rate of the change of the theoretical option value. Wherever it says option, I want you guys to understand it just means derivative. Does that make sense? The underlying asset's price. So like, let's say if you have an option on NVIDIA, the delta is the rate of change of the theoretical option value with respect to the change in the underlying asset's price. So literally delta is shown like this. Delta is equal to the derivative of the value against the derivative of the option value against the derivative of the underlying. Does that make sense? So it's 0.1, okay? So it's a ratio. It's a ratio. So the spot, my apologies. This is the spot, and this is the fucking value of the option. Does that make sense? So the change in the spot versus the change in the value of the option, this is called its delta. So if you remember me talking about options before and how perhaps a 10% change or a 20% change in the value of the spot can be a delta of like 200%. Yep, 200%. That would be a delta of about 10. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, okay. They're going to play the Inclination Witch Vault. I could also do that today. Let's see if I have enough time. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. And it's 6 times a week and not every day. Come on, MetaMask. Don't let me down. And we've got 2 minutes. And yes, good morning, Perception. And I forgot to say good morning to everybody, but I'm going to get back into that. So look at this. First of all, 16% EPR with 24,000 staked. And the total staked wallets is now 50. So that's interesting. This data right be... By the way, one of our devs has been working on perhaps making a subgraph handle the subgraph handling the PPESD instead of how we have it set up now, and we might be implementing that as a change. You might not see any different other than some numbers get calculated differently, but yep, I will show you how that works. And I have 266.16, and I see this time here. I think that the best way to do about it on this side screen, because MetaMask tends to block the epoch counter, is effectively take this, max stake this here, click stake, and then scroll up, right? So by the time I'm clicking that, see, this is the game. You got to scroll up after clicking stake. That way MetaMask doesn't cuck you out of the incantation. Okay. However, this is also a great view where you can watch the number 24,000 just suddenly jump. I wonder what it'll jump to. The gratuity is the same, which I think was 5%. Yeah, the gratuity has not been changed. We're probably going to keep gratuity at 5%. $13 seconds, 12 seconds. Okay. Processing now. Oh, perfect. We have a whale sitting out, you guys. A whale is chosen to sit out. How amazing is that? It's almost like the system regulates that. Goodness gracious. Well, we got a confirmed stake. And I don't see the epoch. Yes, we're in. Oh my goodness. We got in with seconds. I wonder. It looks like I did get smoldered some. It looks like I did get smoldered some. Perhaps one time. See, I had 265. Now I have 263. Did I get smoldered 20 times? That's impossible. Is somebody running a flogging bot? I'm down. Holy shit, how did I lose? How did I lose like 1.5%? Let's see, what did I have? What did I have? Let me pull up a good old phantom scan. Do we have a flogging bot? I guess I'm not mad about a flogging bot. Because people will just taper playing. Oh, so I was literally just back run by 15 people. That's amazing. Arguably, bravo to the 15 people that are now playing at this pro level. Four people staked? Okay. Well, electronic, you don't. Yeah. Yeah, you stake late. Yeah, you stake late. I don't think there is a flogging bot. Let's see. Okay, so I entered with, let's see. Should I just look at transfers? Is that what I should look at? Okay, so I entered with 266, right? Right? Entered with 266 because that's the exact same amount. And then I literally exited with 264. Yeah, 264.66. So that's literally like what? 264.66 out of 266.16, right? So therefore, let me run my little calculator app here. So this is 0.99. So this is effectively 1%, right? 1%, or actually, sorry, it's 0.6%. Is that it? Oh, so that is about like 4 people smoldering. But the fact of the matter is, I should also have gotten positive yield, right? So like with positive yield, yeah, like how much was I smoldered? You know what? I'll have to look at this later, but that's very interesting. I guess I can look at the PYRESWAP incantation witch vault and see what was happening there. Yeah, let me see. Let's see. My wallet is this one in this address. Let me find it. D8127. So if we see D8127, or should I gotta look at the front of it, huh? Okay, E87E. E8. 3 minutes ago. Let's see. So I gotta scroll longer. Yep. So the so this is just somebody entering and exiting. Okay. So just normal staking. Okay. Okay, interesting. Because I thought, Zonic, the way that I was interpreting this is like, do we now have an actor that is effectively running multiple like Sibyls of wallets, and they're all just kind of like entering and exiting? Because at a certain point, the gas doesn't make sense to do that, and they could also arguably smolder the other Sibyls. So like, yeah, that didn't make sense to me. Okay, so I got smoldered 10 times, and we probably just had low yield. We just had in general low yield, low incants. Because like, what was the realized positive yield? I guess we don't know. Anyways, yeah, exciting. Only the last wallet knows, huh? Okay, well, you know, in theory, that can also be viewed. Anyways, okay, more on that later. But yeah, there you go. That's what it's all about. It must have been incredibly low positive yield because I got smoldered 10 times. But anyways, going back to cross lambda coefficients. And by the way, as far as the game theory of this goes, when the particular pot is small in the incantation witch vault, larger players are more likely to pass. Does that make sense? But they're no longer paying attention. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Because you guys just saw a 1% loss taken by me, or maybe like a 0.6% loss. I have no idea. But like literally a 1% loss taken by me because I got smaller 10 times or 6 times. Does that make sense? Like even with positive yield. And what that does is that incentivizes people to either reduce the amount they're playing with or to pass on that round. Does that make sense? Because there is a positive and negative incentive to the size of the bag you're playing with. The most advantageous size to play, most times. Do you guys know what a normal distribution curve looks like? Do you guys know what normal distribution curve looks like? A bell curve, yeah. I'm gonna put up normal distribution curve. .4 effective yield. There you go. The yield was low. Yield was low, and if I got smaller 10 times, that would explain why I'm down 0.6. Make sense? Okay, normal distribution. There you go. This is actually the better image. Damn, that's terrible. There we go. Okay, do you guys see that? Okay, so the believe it or not, when you see the incantation witch vault get filled up with traffic, what you'll notice is that the majority of people, whether they're doing this consciously or not, the majority of people are kind of in this cluster of size. Does that make sense? I'm playing way down here. I'm playing with like 260. But the majority of people are playing between like, you'll notice they have, I would say like a 5-figure amount. Does that make sense? You'll notice that the majority of upticks go up from 5-figure chunks. Do you know what I'm saying, Maddie? You'll notice some people play with a 6-figure amount, right? Maybe Electronic plays with 6 figures. Maybe Why So Cynical plays with 6 figures. Does that make sense? But Electronic and Why So Cynical are only like 2 out of 20 possible players, right? Whether or not all 20 are playing in a single epoch. Does that make sense? So they're playing with, and I'm talking about Pyre Phantom right now because it's the one that I have most experience with. So the majority of people, though, are playing with this amount in the middle of the curve. And the reason they're doing this is because they're actually figuring out that being in the middle of the pack is generally the most consistently profitable. Does that make sense? Like, not the most profitable by a moonshot, but it is most consistently profitable. Ray Dalio, literally the guy who wrote this book right here, he says that sometimes having a larger position makes it less profitable. Does that make sense? So believe it or not, this is why it does not cater to whales. Does that make sense? Having the largest position, like your ability to depress the realized yield is definitely higher, but in order for you to get more of the pot, you have to definitely be holding a lot more and risking a lot more. Does that make sense? A disproportionately higher amount. Do you guys remember this math? If imagine there's 30 Pyre Phantom playing, right? Let's say that there's I'm gonna go back to Cross Lambda right after this. This game is also like its own evolution event. It's like its own Darwinistic sieve. So like it's always selecting for people that are the right size. It's looking for a Goldilocks zone player, and the Goldilocks zone players are the ones that do the best consistently with this game. And that will be even more so when the prices are at meeting parity. You'll see that later. So if you've got player 1, player 2, and player 3, and they all have 100, and they're playing for a pot which has 30. Does that make sense? Assuming no smoldering, we're just gonna make a smoldering negligible here. If they all staked at the same time, how much would they all get in yield? How much would they all get in incants? If there was 3 players. Who here can tell me these numbers? It's all the same number. Which number? Minus 0? 10. Okay, 10. Correct. 10. Correct? Does everyone understand? If you had 30 and all 100, yeah. But Alessio, I realize that it's not always a conscious thing. For instance, did you know that the players don't like consciously select the middle of the path? That ends up happening over time because the evolutionary pressure ends up saying, be this size. Because this size, you're risking the right amount and you're getting the right amount of reward. Does that make sense? This is why the game is played over time. And it's also why an awareness campaign and having a larger user base is critical. Because when we talk about having 300 daily players, we don't mean having 300 of the same people playing every day. We might mean that we need to have 2,500 weekly players where everybody plays once a week. Does that make sense? Because the fact of the matter is, it's just like that amount of randomness is going to end up letting the game's mechanics shine through. I hope that makes sense to you guys, right? Did you guys know that in chess, because white goes first, they have like a 3% advantage? Like white has a 53% chance of winning the game, like all the time. It's just in the mechanics. Does that make sense? The Witchfall also has mechanics like that, right? So, now, what if though, what if player 3, all of a sudden, he doesn't think 10% is enough for him. So what does he do? He increases his position to 400. Can anybody tell me what how the pot is split now? These two will get the same number, and this one will get a different number. Correct. It is 5, 5, and 20. Do you guys understand? Do you guys understand? Zero Kicks, do you also understand? And by the way, it would actually be a little higher than 60, 20, 20 because he is not triple their position, but quadruple their position. Make sense? So, now you can see that for a player with 100, their yield is now dropped to 5%. Does that make sense to you guys? So their yield was cut in half. Let me see if I can find another. I'm going to pull the red from back here. I'm going to try at least. Right, so now this is half. This is half. But what did this guy get? He got double. He got double, right? I'll put the X. Do you guys see that instead of 10, he got 20? Yeah, thank you, Jabri. Does everyone understand that that this player 3 got double the yield he would have with 100? But yeah, but see, is it a pro gamer move? Because think about this. In order to double his yield, he had to quadruple his risk. Does that make sense? Yeah. In order to double his reward, he had to quadruple his risk. Does that make sense? So do you guys understand that this is a diminishing return for the whale? Right? He couldn't play with 100. He quadrupled it. He quadrupled it, but only got twice more yield. Do you guys understand this? And this is an anti-whale measure as well. This is also a pressure that pushes everybody towards the middle. Normal distribution. And you'll notice that on the chain, by the way. On the chain, you'll notice majority of positions are all kind of gravitating towards like the median. It's weird. It's weird, almost like as if by design. Even with 10 players. Even with 10 players, you'll see it. Do you guys understand this now? So that's the point. This game does not exactly cater to whales. It's catering to people that are thinking about what the other players are going to do. Does that make sense? This is not in the short version, the stuff about normal distribution. It'll probably be in the long version of the docs. This is a bit much to jam down people's throats. But that's literally how it works. Does that make sense? And by the way, it's also not often the largest player sticking last either. I know that like the majority of DeFi is brokenly asymmetrical, where like the largest player is also the fastest player, and everybody feels they're just getting bullied by somebody who has more resources than them. But this game effectively has its own balancing mechanisms across the board, and you see that dynamically. All right. Okay, back to cross lambda coefficient. So you guys understand delta there. If we go back to the Greeks on finance, I want to see, am I on stake now? Okay, great. If we go back to these Greeks, you notice lambda is the percentage change in option value. It is similar to the concept of delta, but expressed in a percentage rather than in absolute terms. And in absolute terms means a ratio, a coefficient. Does that make sense to you guys? A ratio is a coefficient. Does everybody follow me here? You could also call cross lambda ratio. You could probably also call it cross lambda coefficient, or sorry, cross lambda ratio, CLR, I guess. I think that's an acronym for something else, but CLC, I'm cool with. I know ratio is used in the original Tomb Finance, so maybe I'm not going to use that word. Cross lambda coefficient has nothing to do with Tomb forks. It has nothing to do with liquidity. It has nothing to do with dexes. So the fact of the matter is why do we call it cross lambda and not lambda? So if you look down here, look here on this Wikipedia, you'll notice that there's Greeks for multi-asset options. So if the value of a derivative is dependent on two or more underlyings, its Greeks are extended to conclude the cross effects between the thing. So you'll see that there's cross gamma, cross vana, cross volga, and correlation delta. Do you guys understand that? So when you say cross, you're implying that it implies with a multi-asset derivative, not an option, a multi-asset derivative. So if you understand that if you have Bitcoin ETH LP, right? We'll say wrapped Bitcoin against wrapped ETH, so it's fucking technical. This is a multi-asset derivative. It is not being interpreted as a multi-asset derivative like anywhere in DeFi. Well, somewhere, here and there it's being interpreted. But this is effectively where, for those of you who were here yesterday, the term Ghibli comes from. Does that make sense? So when you want to interpret things like impermanent loss, understand that you're looking at a cross lambda coefficient, meaning the sensitivity of the dollar price of Bitcoin against Ethereum's LP against the percent change in one or more of the underlying. Does that make sense? This is why we call it cross lambda coefficient, because this is actually the way to interpret it. It's not a loss, right? Because literally until something is realized, it's not a loss. And not all things that take money away from you are losses either. Like when you pay a premium or a cost. These are also not losses. Like they are just the price of things. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? This is why it's called cross lambda coefficient. Cross lambda factor, cross lambda ratio. You end up with a percentage of basically the sensitivity of the LP to the underlying of the spot. So if Bitcoin goes up and Ethereum doesn't, you have this percentage of impermanent loss. But it's not a loss, it's the cross lambda. Does that make sense? Because the fact of the matter is, the percent change in Bitcoin's price doesn't tell you anything about the amount of time that it took for it to happen, nor the amount of volume that it took for it to happen. And by volume, I mean either volume, product volume or quotient volume. Does everybody follow me? Do you guys understand me? Anyways, that we'll have more on that in phase 2. There's no real point in me debuting cross lambda theories while everybody is still confused about whether deflation outpacing inflation will make the chart go up. Okay, like there's a lot of stuff that I want to debut. Thank you. Yes, I think the phrases is great because I really feel extreme anxiety when I have to coin a new term because well, honestly, Alessio, you should see a lot of price uptick way before phase 2 as well. But phase 2, okay, I'll tell you guys this. The stuff in the phases of PYRESWAP are designed, they are designed as such that I really need people, like a large enough group, to get their brains wrapped around the phase 1. Does that make sense? The first phase. And this is just the labor. This is just the labor of this project. And it's not the end of the world. We're actually doing a great job at it. I think that other people just expect instant gratification, and they don't like the idea of compounding growth. But again, we've got Turkish stickers. They're getting distributed in 8 different cities on Monday. We're getting stickers apparently in multiple cities in Texas. Exactly that. Exactly that. Thank you. Yes, I'm Mr. Miyagi. Yes. Yeah, literally that. And that's so funny, like, we just wax on and then wax off. And he goes over the basics and the brilliance. But arguably, like, that idea is, again, I think that when you get that type of answer, the person you're listening to feels like they're not listening. So I know that a lot of people have had anxiety about the charts, and I know that me not having anxiety was confusing for people, because a lot of times you would see a founder project like either avoiding the spotlight or avoiding questions, or like, just giving some sort of promise, or like not explaining how it would turn around. We're going to make deflation higher than inflation. At the same time, we're scaling the user base. Does that make sense? So literally, it's the effect that the prices will naturally uptick more often. The fact that people who are now speculating on the uptick will then drive the price higher. And then the fact of the matter is the people that we're marketing to will now see the chart in an uptrend. And the ones that figure out where it's headed, they now know that that's likely the lowest they're ever going to get to buy it. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, I know that I think with, like, when I think and implement stuff, I'm trying to make things hit the most dominoes in once. Pega is not incorrect. I think some people are just unclear about my approach to things, because I think I know what I'm doing, and I continue to prove that. Oh, by the way, guys, a mathematician has joined the project. Guys, a real mathematician. He has turned Phythianism into actual calculus. He did it on a PDF the other day. Yeah. So literally, I'm not gonna tell his name yet, but he literally wrote out 2 sheets just proving that it works. I was blown away. I was so blown away. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna debut this guy maybe next week, or maybe in early September or something. And yeah, he will literally turn Phythian bastard calculus into actual formal calculus. Like, it blew me away that he's like, yeah, this project worked. By the way, the reason that we got so many Discord Nitro boosts in the last week is because of him. He kind of got that ball rolling. So yeah, and an actual mathematician who literally, yeah, he just analyzed this project mathematically, and he's like, I'm all in with PYRESWAP. Like, this is a no-brainer. And I'm like, it is a brainer, because you know how to do calculus and other people just don't. Like, so I'm like, I guess it's a no-brainer for you, but other people are not as fortunate to have those math skills. And some people, it blows my mind that math from like math from when they were 10 years old is still kind of like kneecapping people. See, CJ, you're not wrong. I would say, CJ, that, okay, you know what I noticed about storytelling recently? Now, by the way, you guys, if you guys don't know, I'm like an obnoxious Christian, but I'm going to talk to you guys about the invention of religion, right? The invention of folk religion, okay? People back in the day, they would see thunderstorms, they would see lightning, they would see tornadoes and earthquakes, and they would have no fucking explanation for what the fuck just happened. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine being like a hunter-gatherer and then a fucking earthquake happens for like, I don't know, 8 minutes? Can you guys like imagine seeing a tornado come and just like tear trees out of the ground as a hunter-gatherer? Can you guys like really, I mean, seriously, imagine this. Like, you've never seen a computer, you've never watched a weather report in your life, you've never seen a picture of a tornado on the internet, You've never seen what it looks like from far away. You've never seen like a helicopter video of one from far away. You've only seen them at your ground level height, and you watch this thing come down from the sky, touch the ground, and then just start tearing trees out of the ground. Yeah, the God candle, as it were. It's a great way to describe it. So you end up with like these mythologies, right? Like I mean, to use Greek and Roman, the pantheon, you would have like the god of the sky or some shit, right? I don't even know who the fuck that would be. Apollo? No, I don't fucking know, dude. Maybe it was Poseidon. Oh, I think Zeus. Oh yeah, it's probably Zeus. It's probably just fucking Zeus. So Zeus is the god of thunder and lightning, and you know, he's obviously like the father of the gods because the thunderstorm shows up most often, I guess. And the fact of the matter is, people, they just don't like the mystery. Does that make sense? Poseidon has a few derivative attributes as well. All of them have derivative attributes. Yeah, by the way. Like Ares is the god of war, but also like of raising grain as agriculture. Yeah, like it's, I'm not going to get into that shit. But like literally, people love stories. Does that make sense? Well, I'm not going to get into, I'm not saying I'm creating lore. There you go. Yeah, for sure. And of course, that's 100% it. But like, people need an explanation more than they want the mystery. Does that make sense? So if it's like, hey, Zeus creates the lightning. People need any explanation that they can feel is plausible or plausible or feasible. Does that make sense? Versus not knowing at all. Like they don't want to like be somewhere where like, hey, what is lightning? And everyone's like, I don't know. Does that make sense? They would rather feel better listening to somebody who sounds like they know what they're talking about. Does that make sense? So you end up with, why do we have thunder and lightning? Okay, so on Mount Olympus, there exists a god who sends lightning down from the sky. And he does this when he is, whenever, right? Do you guys get what I'm saying? You know, there's people that do that, by the way. There's somebody on Twitter, and she got very famous for, You're Not Wrong, early era podcast. And that, by the way, that's where you ended up with the priest. The priest. Does that make sense? Like the priest as an archetype. Do you guys know about Jungian archetypes? Let's pull that up. No, not this one. The roll. Here you go. Okay. So you end up with the ruler, the artist, the innocent. I don't know if you can read this. The sage, the explorer, the outlaw, the magician, the hero, the lover, the jester, the everyman, the caregiver, and the ruler. I guess you could describe the fucking priest as the magician, or maybe the sage, or maybe the ruler. You know, I mean, it's going to be like a combination there. Does that make sense? But like you have the priest that fulfills this role for society, because the priest, whether they're like a witch doctor or something, and maybe they know how to make medicine out of weird herbs, like them knowing other things as well is just like plausible. It's like, hey, this guy knows how to make aspirin out of willow bark. Maybe he also knows why there's lightning. Does that make sense? So people kind of buy into this narrative. Do you guys get what I'm saying? There's a lot of stuff that causes price chart action in crypto that is really fake news. Does that make sense? Like fake as fuck news. Does that make sense? Crypto has a fake news cycle. And people, if you understand human nature in this concept that like people are more willing to listen to somebody who's giving an explanation, yeah, rather than somebody who's like actually like debunking it. Does that make sense? By the way, guys, did you know that there was a UN chief? There's also something called recency bias. There's something called recency bias, by the way, and this is also what affects markets. Recency bias, and I'll pull the Wikipedia up for this if you want. And what recency bias does is it makes current information more heavily weighted than past information, which is not always necessarily how it should be. Does that make sense? Recency bias. And actually, it's cool that Investopedia had that there. I don't even have a way to put this in the fucking Discord here. But anyways, yeah, recency bias is a cognitive bias that favors recent events over historic ones. And this is also why some people don't believe that there's a value in learning history. But the point being here is, did you guys know that the UN chief in earlier this year, they predicted that there would be 500,000 people in Palestine starving to death by July because of the Israel and Palestine conflict, right? So the UN, like a UN chief, predicted that 500,000 people in Palestine would starve from famine by July of this year. Does that make sense? Like, so nobody cares though that he got that so ridiculously wrong, because he just tracked a trend and he didn't really think about like what would reverse it. Does that make sense? Like, he was literally looking at a week of behavior and then extrapolating it over like 26 weeks or something like that. Does that make sense? There's no real famine happening there. They're still fighting because they've been doing that for 75 years. But like, it's just the fact that, oh, hey, he got that significantly wrong, but people loved it at the time if it suited their bias. Does that make sense? If people already believed what they already believed about that conflict and they heard that, they used it as like, hey, this authority here is saying that 500,000 people are going to starve to death. Does that make sense? It was the prophecy of the period. Does that make sense? It was the prophecy of convenience, right? It suited their bias at the time. Do those people think that they themselves are like part of the problem? They push this everywhere, and then nobody cares, and like nobody's held responsible for how glaringly inaccurate it is. Does that make sense? Because now everybody's thinking about something else. Yeah, exactly. CJ, but that's not how propaganda works, is it? They take speculative things and they make them declaratives. I fucking hate declaratives, and that's a declarative right there. But yeah, I prefer to say, in my opinion, or this is just based on what I've seen, I prefer to like own it and make it like, hey, I'm not going to imply these things. Like, I can say use the word probabilistically too, so everyone understands that like there's always noise in the machine, but like you can still probabilistically steer it. Anyways, yeah, people do prefer confirmation rather than invalidation, because people really like feeling right, and they hate feeling wrong. But this doesn't help a person grow. Yeah, this doesn't help a person grow. Like, when you're wrong, you need to figure out like where you're wrong and why you're wrong, and correct. Like, I was wrong with how much marketing this project would need. I was wrong with my attitude towards marketing in general, and like I had to now correct twice, and like I'm now overcorrecting. Does that make sense? Like Lesio, hey, there's nothing to be worried about, because now like I'm just looking at like marketing is everything now. Does that make sense? Like the entire I'm on screen right now because all of these little clips from these videos can get repurposed for content marketing. Does that make sense? Like, what was the point of getting on screen in the first place? Do you know? Like, it wasn't just to talk to like 25 people. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't, for sure. Like, there's definitely been larger projects that had less production, that had less promotion, right? But I have to realize that I am literally shifting the paradigm of DeFi. This is going to have a resistance to it. In order to burst through that resistance, I have to just hit it with the biggest hammer possible as frequently as possible. So that is where the marketing comes from. And we're not going to under-market ever again. We're going to have marketing going all the time from here on out, even during winter. Yeah, I think so. I think so, Lesio. You've also been here for 2 years. So, yeah, you've been here. You were actually in the original 2-ohm. So, yeah, I'm not worried either. But, yeah, that's the case. So, again, make deflation higher than inflation. By the way, this will make APR climb back up as well. Did you guys know that? It will make APR go back up, and it will make the dollar value of your liquidity go back up too. Does that make sense? Also, since people are going to see the chart reversing, they're going to be holding more illiquid as well. Yeah, I would assume that you might start seeing people start selling again when we're back at the meeting line. But before we get back to the meeting line, I would like to, of course, continue focusing on marketing the shit out of this. And we're about 35 minutes after. Who here has a question about anything we talked about today? Does anyone understand deflation and inflation? We're talking about two rates. I can talk about deflation and Marmoset Zugzwang, CJ, is basically when we have the user base scaled up enough that effectively they understand how it all works, and they're allowed to effectively completely follow their own self-interest without worrying about what other people are going to do. Does that make sense? Like literally, so it's kind of what the Marmoset Zugzwang threshold is what happens to meme coins like Pepe. Does that make sense? It gets so large enough, that even though this is a pointless project, it becomes a risk reversal for the amount of participants in the project. Does that make sense? Like it's a top 25 market cap or something like that, or was the other day. So because Pepe is now so big, it always has volume. Does that make sense? There's no reason that it would have any volume. Does that make sense? There's no reason that it would have any volume other than the fact that other people see volume. So CJ, if you've heard me say, enough people need to feel that enough people feel there's enough people. I'm talking about like at an order of 3, in third order, there needs to be the idea of a crowd. So not just the idea that we have 25 people playing today. Like that's enough people to fill a room, but we need to make the crowd so big that people don't know each other's names. Does that make sense? Which is called de-individuation. So this is based on Dunbar's number, which by the way, Dunbar's number is the amount of, literally that, Dunbar's number, and by the way, that's also a great way for how the incantation witch vault can work too. Like it doesn't necessarily require to have the same players in there every day, because people will in fact pick and choose the epochs they play, which also makes for a higher degree of randomness when you don't have like, I'm not trying to create linearity everywhere. Everything is a waveform. The Marmoset Zugzwang, we're talking about like, CJ, once enough people see how this works, they won't be able to ignore this project anymore. Does that make sense? And the thing is, that kind of requires every single moving piece to kind of be demonstrated and established. And when we really are going to see that, CJ, is when we have like, I would say it's going to be a certain amount of transactions in a single segment of the Velvet Rope. Does that make sense? Not volume, but a certain amount of different wallets transacting. So I guess you could say market makers, as Dexscreener describes it. So it's going to be like if enough people are transacting in a 6-hour period, that's where you're going to see the Velvet Rope really come into play, because people are going to be more likely implementing the swing of the rope in their strategy, because this rope will begin swinging to the point that it changes the way people will play the Incantation Witch Vault too. Does that make sense to you guys? Like the way you play the Incantation Witch Vault will also involve the price action on the chart. We don't want the chart to just look flat and like wiggling like a worm. Does that make sense? We want a real Velvet Rope. And in order to make that Velvet Rope happen, user base needs to be bigger, liquidity needs to be deeper. That's all it takes. But thankfully, both of these things happen. More players. Yeah. More Pyre gas. Oh yeah, more players at Electronic also create more volume, which creates more yield. Does that make sense? So like, again, I'm going to explain how user base solves all the problems before I get off. How about this? User base up, smoldering up. Why is smoldering up? Either from volume going up, which means yields going up, or literally staking is going up. Does that make sense? And if the yield is going up, people are playing with more. Does that make sense? But if there's more people, they're also staking more. Like, increasing user base makes everything go up exponentially. Does that make sense? Like, I know it's like, do we need 100 grand? No, we need 100 people with $1. Like, we don't need 100 grand. I don't know, like, I don't know if people have been listening to me. I'm going to explain something here as well. A lot of people think that they're looking at this side of the terazu and they're saying, we need more TVL. Does that make sense? We need to make this pan go up. Everyone says that to me today, right? I'm telling everybody, we need to put weight on this pan if we want to make this pan go up. Stop looking at this pan. We have a fucking fulcrum here. Push down on this pan. Increase the user base. Like, there is always a terazu. There's always a fucking fulcrum. Does that make sense? This is a scale. Everyone's like, how do we make this go up? By making this go down. Like, it's not that fucking hard. Like, I'm always talking about this. If you guys want to understand 5 better, go buy one of these and then put it on your desk whenever you're listening to me. So you can kind of see what I'm always talking about. Always talking about this. How do we make the price go up? By making this go down. Holy shit. How do we make the price go up? Maybe by decreasing inflation and increasing deflation. User base, smoldering goes up, volume goes up, staking goes up, yield goes up. User base goes up. I'm going to go back to this. By the way, and then yield goes up, which goes back to staking goes up. User base goes up. TVL goes up. When TVL goes up, what happens to volume and then yield? Thank you, Electronic. Yeah, Electronic, that is the exact GIF I use to explain how like other devs fix their project. They're just like putting a finger on the pan. I am not trying to we're not fake fixing this project. We are going to real fix this project. So we have to do that by building an economy. And that requires more actors. It requires more actors with their own individual agendas. Correct, Alessio. User base goes up, TVL goes up. If TVL goes up, holy shit, it's almost like volume goes up, which makes yield go up. Which makes what? Staking go up? Holy shit. User base goes up. You guys know what that means? It means user base goes up again. Do you guys see that? Can everybody see the screen? Can everybody? Yes, yes. And organic growth and organic participation. There's guys right now, hey, for 600 bucks, I'm going to get you 1,000 Chinese people. And I'm like, okay, that might be something we do, but I don't think that just like stampeding 1,000 Chinese people in right now, even if that offer is like completely correct, I don't know if that is actually the move. Does that make sense? Like, hey, 600 bucks. By the way, I've already spent that much on stickers already, and we're just gonna send 1,000 Chinese people right into your Discord server. And I'm like, okay, that would make things interesting, but perhaps that's not exactly the move. Thank you, Electronic. Yeah. We're gonna show you on Weibo. We're gonna be on Weibo, you guys. Do you guys understand this? User base goes up, smoldering goes up, because volume goes up, because staking goes up, and then yield goes up, which makes staking go up. Staking go up twice. User base goes up, TVL goes up, which means volume goes up, which means yield goes up, which means staking goes up. Does that make sense? User base goes up, and user base goes up. Which why, literally since the first fucking week, everybody was so goddamn happy in the first week. And I'm like, hey, I don't give a shit if you 5x your bag in the first week. We need to scale the user base. That's the only thing that makes this project succeed or fail. It has nothing to do with the price. The price will handle itself when we make the user base go up. Do you guys understand me? Like literally every problem you want to solve, we should solve it the real way. I'm not trying to put duct tape on a goddamn nuclear reactor. Does that make sense? We're going to solve it the right way, in the real way, so I don't have to keep putting my finger on a goddamn dish and spinning plates like a fucking Ponzi operator. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, we solve it the real way by dividing the pie that we already have, which ends up multiplying the value. Because as the user base goes up, the user base goes up. Community value ends up being exponential. Have you guys seen my fucking formula? It's not a formula, it's a model. Who here knows my model? Thank you, ZeroKex. Literally that, yes. Developers, 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 developers! Do you guys know that GIF? Do Do you guys know the GIF that ZeroKex just posted with Steve Ballmer? Developers, 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 developers. You know, if I'm ever speaking on stage, if the Sandwich Circus is ever speaking on stage, we're gonna recreate this exact fucking thing. Yeah, we're gonna get the exact clothes and everything. I will literally wear like a fake bald thing and do the exact same thing. Yeah, I'll do that at a fucking conference. Anyways, yeah, polos, hell yeah, fucking love that look. Okay, for those of you who don't know, there's not an infinite amount of reasons that people end up buying something. Do you guys know these subscripts? Value of, we'll call this price. The price value. And then we have, let's call it, yeah, we'll just do it normal. We'll just make this transaction value actually. Speculative value. And then we have utility value. And then we have brand value. And then we have community value. Did you guys know this? Transaction value and speculative value and utility value, brand value, and community value. If you've seen this formula like this before, I have reformatted it to the point that speculative value is actually a coefficient on the others, because speculative value can apply to transaction value, or it can apply to utility value, or brand value, or community value. Does that make sense? Like speculative value is the exponent. Does that make sense to you guys? So arguably it would be like each one of these potentially has speculative value like as its exponent. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you guys understand this? Anyways, if you've seen this before in the past, this is the 2022 version. I promise you when I formally present this, it's going to look a little bit different, but it's just basically that this speculative value, we've made it an exponent on the other ones. So the reason that people buy things, there's really not that many reasons. They're speculative positively about it. They are going to use it like utility value. They have brand value, meaning they trust the person selling it, or they have community value, meaning they trust the decisions made by the people who already bought it. Does that make sense? Right? So it's actually just 4 types of trust. It's 4 types of trust and or risk. They're willing to take a risk on the price. They're willing to take a risk on the utility. They're willing to take a risk on the brand, or take a risk on the fucking community. They are reversing risk in their head, which allows them to make the transaction to expose it. Now, what ends up determining the price is how scarce it is. This is the supply total of whatever they're buying. This equation, this model, does not just apply to crypto coins. It applies to everything from houses to dry erase markers to blazers to diagrams to cameras. Does that make sense? So the fact of the matter is, we started off with building utility value. Does that make sense? Now, would you guys believe that the utility value of this token goes up with community value? It's almost like I designed it that way. Does that make sense? Because I want the community to enhance the rest of this stuff. Like, I've been talking about community value since 2022. Like, it's there for sure. Community value helps risk reversal and the other things. So we start off with utility because we can just have the devs build that, right? The devs just build it. And then I designed it, right? But then after that, if it doesn't have a user base that actually want to use it, it's confusing. Like, what's the point of this? Meme coins, by the way, they're heavy on brand value and very weak on utility value. So first of all, the good news is that we have this really cool fantasy fiction aesthetic, which everybody really likes. So our brand value is actually not that bad these days. Does that make sense? Our brand value is not that bad. Like, people like the look of it, right? Some people have heard of us. We're doing okay on brand value. Everything else is community value, because I don't even need 100,000 people for this to look like it works. I need like a few hundred. And it just happens that while I was working on this, the marketing rug was getting pulled underneath my feet, because some people remember we had 5 different Discords for this project in 2022. We had 9,000 people in Discords. Back in 2022, you could launch anything with 9,000 people in a Discord. Did you guys know that? 9,000 people in a Discord, and you didn't have to run Telegram or Twitter. Do you guys understand? Anyways, the community now is heavily on Twitter. So that's where we kind of bring people in. That's what it's all about. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you guys for coming to the PYRESWAP show. Tomorrow is Thankful Thursday, and we'll also do some Theory Thursday. So I can maybe get into yield-bearing liquidity instruments if you want, or you can ask me about something else, or we can go over deflation and inflation again, and maybe Jungian archetypes. We can go over financial Greeks if you want. Thank you guys for coming. Have a great rest of your day.